James Jackson, President of the New South Wales Farmers. Great to have you back with us on Flow in 2022.
Yeah, great for you to have your interest in the story, Ricky. It's an important piece of work, this supply chain issues, if you like.
Now, this is the one there you're talking about, these issues concerning the stock markets as well, and I mean the livestock markets, and we had a bit of a dip in some of the prices recently attributed to challenges for processors. There's a lot of moving parts here. Can you walk us through them?
Yes, well, there's a number of reasons why our supply chains have been interrupted, and I mean, big amongst them, of course, is COVID. We've got a situation where a lot of people are off sick, and some of the processors and the distribution centres, have essentially closed down because they haven't got the workers. But sometimes it's due to lack of rapid antigen tests. So we desperately need those antigen tests so sick people can stay at home, healthy people can actually work in the abattoir or in the distribution centre. But there is another reason why we're seeing this supply chain problem, and it's the concentration that we've got in our supply chains. We have far too few processors. We have far too few retailers of fresh food in this country. It is the most concentrated supermarket sector in the world. We've got 70% of the retail, effort, if you like, in Australia from two major supermarkets, and 90% by the four majors. So we're seeing supply chains that, circumvent these players. You see them actually quite successful. So the local butcher has still got meat on their shelf. The local greengrocer has still got fruit and vegetables on their shelf. So those people who have circumvented the supply chains that we've got have still got food on their shelves. And this brings us to the issue that the ACCC and our politicians have allowed a concentration in these supply chains that's unhealthy. Now, we've suffered the consequences of this for some time. It's the dollar milk. We've seen the dollar milk. We've seen, them gouging prices on horticultural products, and we see them, essentially closing down the meat supply chain because their supply chains are damaged. So the ACCC and our government have a case to answer as to why we're not seeing food on the shelves at the moment.
Yeah, it's good you got that quick mention, and I'll come back to the competition issues at the moment. That mention of local butchers, that's what we're picking up, is that some people have walked across from the supermarket and gone to the butcher, maybe for the first time in a long time, because they've been able to identify a meat supply positive there. Yes,
and this is exactly right. I mean, they essentially work on a different supply chain. A lot of the problem with the supermarket, they're distribution centres, so they go to a centralised distribution centre, and they've actually fallen over. They've got no trucks operating. They've got no rat tests to keep healthy people working while sick people are away and whatnot. So essentially they've been completely caught out, if you like. So those just-in-time sort of supply chains are very, very, susceptible to this sort of interruption. Now, the local guy, the greengrocer who goes down to the markets, picks up a ute load of fruit and vegetables and just stocks his shelf. Well, that's a lot more robust. So it's like the meat guys. They have their own kill and they hold more stock, so they don't have this just-in-time supply chain. So a lot of the disruptors or the smaller sectors, that other 10%, if you like, of retailing space for fresh food in this country, is actually outperforming the majors significantly in this downturn. That tells you that there's a problem with competition in this country. ACCC and the government, their competition laws are not fit for purpose. The Americans, Biden is looking at increasing competitive tension in the meat processing sector in America, and America has got more competition than Australia. So there's no appetite to change it in Australia. The laissez-faire approach to competition, we don't care if there's monopolies develop in Australia. We don't really care as long as the consumer benefits. Well, the chickens have come home to roost, if you like. This is demonstrative that the consumer does not always benefit from monopolies.
Yeah, I think in this case we've got Coles and Woolworths. I think they call it an oligopoly, but it's never mind the technical terms. The real issue is this concentration of power. One of my sources tells me a distribution centre in Adelaide of one of the major supermarkets is almost completely offline because of COVID-19. But then there's this sort of strong-arming stuff you see from corporates as well. There was a processor down in South Australia that they said they wouldn't take supply from because of their policies regarding COVID and their workers. I mean, that's effectively taken one processor offline. I mean, that's another indicator that these guys have gotten too big for their boots, isn't it?
Absolutely. There's no two ways about it. That the power that's exercised from the retail sector has flowed through the supply chain to the processors. We've seen, in New South Wales, I think. I think 15 years ago there was something like 15 chicken meat processors. Now essentially there's two. And if you don't have a contract with those two big supermarkets, essentially you don't exist. So essentially they have really, really powerful negotiating positions now. And I would have to say that it's certainly unhealthy for investment in the supply chain, in the food supply chain, and it's unhealthy ultimately for the consumers as well. This COVID disruption, if you like, has really built the cat on competition laws in this country, and we must do something about it. Both parties, there's an election coming up federally, both parties have got to come up with a solution to this.
Yeah, well, I think that's the case. Anthony Albanese opinion piece in The Australian today indicating he wants Australia to be a nation that makes things and that we skill up our workers for where the shortages are. And one of those identified shortages has been in the processing sector. What do you think Labor might need to do to step up to the plate, and maybe not just in the competition front, but maybe some government investment to help diversify where meat can be processed?
Well, correct. To start with, you've got to get the competition laws, because there's plenty of people who would be happy to invest in new processing capacity and alternate processing capacity, but they're afraid to do so because our competition laws essentially allows the incumbents, due to their vertical and horizontal integration, if you like, those incumbents essentially can put bespoke players out of business. And they've been doing it for years. And under the eyes of the ACCC, and the ACCC, every time that New South Wales farmers or the NFF puts in a complaint about it, they say nothing to see here, nothing to see here. Well, guess what? There is something to see here. It's a mess.
All right, well, we'll be looking into this a bit further. I know there was an approval given by the ACCC recently for pig processing just near the New South Wales border. Classic example of what you're talking about. We'll drill into it further, but James Jackson, thanks very much from the New South Wales farmers for your time today.
No problems, anytime.